Hey folks, as always on Saturdays I am here to talk about an episode of a superhero animated series. Today I'm talking about the Season 1 episode of Batman Beyond titled Spellbound. And if it's been a while since you saw this episode, or you haven't seen it at all, I do warn you that there will be spoilers in this review. So you can either let this be a chance for you to refamiliarize yourself with what happened in the episode, or go watch it real quick before you finish listening to this review. The episode begins with Terry and Dana's somewhat friend Chelsea coming home from a date when she meets a dude in an orange and black stripy costume thing. He flashes a light, and suddenly Chelsea is in an Indiana Jones movie. She steals one of her father's $80,000 statues and throws it into the river, thinking that she is destroying an idol in some faraway jungle. The orange and black dude, our villain of the episode, who we will call Spellbinder, he absconds with the statue while Chelsea gets yelled at by her dad. This same sort of thing happens a couple more times, once to a dude who looks after priceless dresses, and once again to a lady who just got married and has expensive jewelry on her person. Terry himself is even a victim when the school psychiatrist starts asking him questions about what it's like to work for a billionaire. By this point, Bruce and Terry both know who this Spellbinder character is, and Terry is able to defeat him with Bruce's help. Commissioner Barbara Gordon seems suspicious of Terry when he is reporting what happened to the police, and cue credits. I've said before that in the span of 22 minutes, trying to pull off a good mystery is not something that the people behind the series were ever very good at, either in this series or in Batman the Animated Series. In such a short amount of time, you have to set up the bad guy, and if you're trying to throw off the audience, which most mysteries tend to do, then you would want to set up a red herring for them to think is the real threat, and that's just too much to do in 22 minutes. As Paul Dini once said in one of the commentaries for a later episode, when you're watching one of these episodes, you pretty much know that whoever the episode is trying to make you think is the bad guy really isn't, and so whoever you don't think is the real criminal, that's the one, because the episode is operating under such time constraints that it doesn't have time to shake up the formulaic nature of the mystery. And this episode, it avoids all of that by not even pretending that it is a secret who the bad guy really is. As soon as we see the school psychiatrist talking to the police, I knew that he was the bad guy, even the first time that I ever saw this episode. Mostly because we, the audience, already knew what Terry knew when Chelsea stole the statue. Mainly that she really wasn't making anything up, and that there was someone behind it. So if the psychiatrist dude says that she's making it up, and we saw with our own eyes that she was not, then I wonder who the bad guy could be. In all seriousness, since the episode isn't really trying to cover up who the bad guy is, I feel like it is stronger than if it was trying to make the audience think that it was, I don't know, an eccentric scientist who experimented in light rays that were used by Spellbinder. Having said that, another big thing I always hated about the stories where detective work is required is that this world's version of Batman just isn't that good of a detective. Seems like 90% of the time, instead of using his own brain and deducing things that are going on, Bruce would just punch some numbers into the computer and let it figure out what was going on. And that proves to be true in this episode as well. That's the real bummer about how fast our society is evolving, technologically speaking. We don't get to see real honest-to-goodness detective work anymore. And sure, it would be really weird and kind of stupid on Batman's part if he had this supercomputer capable of helping him solve crimes, but he never used it. I get that. It just makes me wish that we could have a Batman series set in the 1930s where Batman actually does not have a computer that does 90% of the thinking for him. I am curious if the people behind the DC animated universe could work with that kind of Batman, or if they use the Bat computer as a crutch because they really were incapable of writing mystery stories. Oh well, that's a mystery, no pun intended, for another time. One thing I've talked about in the past with this series is Terry's own rogues gallery. One advantage that Batman the Animated Series, and every other Batman series for that matter, all have over Batman Beyond is that they don't have to do as much legwork in creating villains for Batman to fight. In Batman the Animated Series, all they had to do was look to 50 years of comics and see what worked. All the hard stuff was done by the people who were making the comics for 50 years. If they realized that the Penny Plunderer didn't really work as a villain, then you did not see him come back again. But if the Joker worked well, then you would see him many more times. And the people behind Batman the Animated Series knew that, and could use that to their advantage. But with Batman Beyond, they had to create all of the bad guys themselves, and so there was a lot more trial and error. I've said before that characters like Derek Powers, the Jokers, and Ink, they all worked really well, and so they would show up more often than, say, Curari or Spellbinder for that matter. Spellbinder actually isn't a terrible villain. He's got a good gimmick that our heroes have to figure out and defeat, and I guess they didn't come up with some kind of anti-light that would counteract his this machine that makes people see visions. So if they really wanted to, they could have used him again. And I think that they even did later in the series. And like I mentioned in one of my reviews in Batman the Animated Series, they had to change his gimmick up just a little bit to make him interesting enough to warrant using him again in the series. Meanwhile, with corporate sabotage being such a thing in the first season of this series, a character like Derek Powers or Ink, they don't really need a whole lot of tweaking every time they show up, because they just work better in this series than someone like Curari or Spellbinder. And heck, maybe if this series was a comic book and had the luxury of lasting longer than 52 episodes, then perhaps the creators could have had more opportunities to find ways to make Spellbinder work as an ongoing villain. For all I know, maybe they did in the more recent Batman Beyond comics that I have not read. Much as I think this episode is pretty good, there are some minor issues, like where the heck did this school psychiatrist even get the mechanism to hypnotize people into stealing for him? That part is kinda glossed over, and admittedly, I never really gave it much thought until now, but it is kind of an issue that I would think our heroes should look into. Hey, maybe that would have been a good way to bring back Spellbinder. Someone else is up to Spellbinder's old tricks, but then you realize it's a different person using the same technology, and then Batman has to shut down the source of this machine instead of just stopping the dude. Just a thought. Also, this episode hints that Barbara Gordon knows who Terry is, and if you've seen later episodes of the series, you know that she knows. But shouldn't Spellbinder also be suspicious? He was sitting outside of Wayne Manor waiting for Terry to come out with the stolen goods, who never arrived, but Batman did. Hey, why is Batman here, way outside of the city, sitting outside of some random house? How did he find Spellbinder? Where the heck is that kid that I hypnotized to steal stuff from Wayne? These pieces all should have been pretty obvious to this guy, right? I mean, he's no criminal mastermind in the same league as Ernst Blofeld, but he's not a dumb thug either. Again, maybe this could have been a neat way to bring him back. Sorta a twisted update on the old Silver Age Superman stories where Lois Lane thought that she had definitive proof that Clark Kent was Superman, and then he would have to find some crazy way to say, nope, you're wrong, but instead of Lois, it would be Spellbinder, thinking that he had figured out that Terry was Batman. Maybe I'm just stretching at this point, but I think it would have been a neat idea. So those are my thoughts on this episode, folks. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you enjoyed my review. If you did, be sure to come back next Saturday to hear me talk about an episode of Batman the Animated Series. And the weekend after that, I'll be talking about another episode of Batman Beyond. And don't forget to check back throughout the week to see some of my other videos that I do. And if you did like this video, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. In the meantime, I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.